Hi there, this is Christina Yonkman, and I'm going to share with you my case study for EDL 852 Intro to Building Leadership. And this case study is who should create the school's vision. And I apologize up front. I have kind of a crackly voice. I've been under the weather this week, so I apologize for that. So we're going to start with section 1, and I'm going to summarize the case and give you the facts that we know about this case study. We know basically what has happened. The Lightville Community School District is growing. They've had an influx of new families and school-age children. They are in a rural location. They currently have 2 schools. They have a K through 6th and a 7 through 12. And about 11 years ago is when the secondary school was built, and the community really felt like they would not need to add on or build for another 40 years. But they have had a growth rate of 2% over the last 25 years. And so over each year. So they've had quite a bit of influx and expansion there. The superintendent looked at an architectural firm to hire them to study the inadequate space concerns. And they basically came up with 3 options. They can, number 1, they can build an additional onto the secondary school and move the 6th graders there. They can build an addition to both the secondary and the elementary and rearrange everybody there, or they can build a new middle school for 6 through 8, and then the 6th grade would move from the elementary and the 7th and 8th grade would move from the secondary. So those were some ideas that the firm came up with. The building initiative was approved by a slight margin. When this went to the community was divided into 3 groups, kind of. There was the first group was the large landowners. They really felt like there shouldn't be anything built within the next 10 years, that they should pay off their first debt before they incurred anything else. And a lot of the people that live in that community are landowners. The second option, or the second group, was our residents who thought they should just add on to the current buildings. And then the third group was some of the newer residents who they had school-age children, and they really supported a new building, and they actually campaigned for it. And so when it went to a vote, it was voted 53 to 47%. So this rural community is now preparing to open a new middle school, and the superintendent has hired a new principal for the middle school. They wanted to hire them about a year ahead to help get the staff hired, organize their programs and curriculum, and work on the equipment and furniture for the new building. So that's a little bit about what has happened. As I said, the principal was hired, and then after they were hired, the principal was charged with hiring new teachers, and so they did hire 4 new teachers. They're looking at new school programs in the curriculum and making some decisions there. They are collaborating on what building furniture and equipment they want, and an advisory committee has been selected, which is what the majority of this case study is about. And their goal is to create a school vision, mission, and philosophy statement, and they have started that process. So looking at what didn't happen, first of all, when the architectural firm was hired, there was really no staff or families or students or anybody involved in that. That was just kind of a decision made by the superintendent. There really weren't any other options discussed besides building. We talked about the 3 opportunities, but did they look at other things, like were there other facilities in town that maybe could be used? It talks about another town being within 10 miles. Is it in the same county? Is there something they could do some redistricting? What are some other options? That just didn't really happen that we know of. There was definitely a lack of communication, as far as it was kind of a superintendent went to the board and then did the hiring. So we did not hear about a lot of communication with other school personnel. There was definitely no collaboration before the principal was hired. And from the time the superintendent got the recommendation from the firm, he took that quickly to the board. So there wasn't really a whole lot of option there as far as time. And the community was not involved at all in the hiring process of the principal, as far as we know. And this is all from reading the case study. Also, There was not a lot of information provided as far as what communities or curriculum was going to be looked at. Again, the staff wasn't involved in any of the decisions for the new building besides the new principal. There were no students or community included on the advisory committee, and we'll talk a little bit about who that makes up here in just a little bit. The advisory committee was not involved when decisions were talked about, when they started talking about a timeline and establishing when they wanted a vision statement. The advisory committee was not involved in any of that. And there was no student or staff involvement in any of those decisions as far as the vision statement. And again, the community was not involved with any of those decisions. So when and where did all of these events occur? As I said, this was a rural community, and this has all happened over the last 25 years as far as the history. Most of what we are talking about in this case study had to have occurred either in the superintendent's office or the Board of Education meetings. As far as the new building, it will be on site as the same, the current two schools are. And then we are really unsure, it didn't really say, but we're assuming that the advisory committee meets somewhere on school property when they do meet. So continuing on with section 1, let's talk about who is involved and what they think. The first we're going to talk about is our superintendent, and that is Joe Rawlings. He is very supportive of the board. He wants to adopt the firm. He wants to build a new middle school, and so he's very supportive of all that. He was involved in selecting the advisory committee, and he was in favor of hiring the new principal, who is Susan Potter. And he is very excited about helping with the selection of the visioning and planning committee. Next, we're moving to our school board, and we have some new members on the school board. There are 2 out of the 5 are new members who have school-age children. One of the members, and we don't know if he's a new one or not, but one of the members is a brother to our committee chair, Miss Burke, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute. The board did vote to conduct the community vote to build the new school, so they were in favor of that, and they were in favor of hiring the new middle school principal, Mrs. Potter. And they're also involved in helping select the visioning and planning committee, which what we consider the advisory committee. Okay, next we're going to talk about the middle school teacher who they hired, Miss Potter. Her name is Susan Potter. She is an experienced teacher. She does like to operate democratically, so she likes there to be a consensus, and she wants each member to have a vote. Her first task was to develop a vision statement that reflects the values and beliefs of the committee, and hopefully the community as well. And she does believe that all stakeholders should be involved in the process of creating this vision statement. So she is very excited about the visioning and planning committee that has been created. She does prefer not to be the chair. She does not want to be the one in charge of the committee. She is very appreciative of the committee's support and confidence. And again, I mentioned that she is not comfortable making those decisions, being an acratic decision making. And she believes in designing and leading a school mission. The philosophy and the vision statement should include all stakeholders. So as we move into our advisory committee, we know that it is made up of 4 teachers and 4 parents. We know that they all agree with Ms. Potter's committee guidelines. And I just mentioned those a little bit ago when I was talking about Ms. Potter. They do feel like, however, that Ms. Potter is the most qualified to be the committee chair, and they actually voted 7-1 for her to be the one to draft the statements. We don't know a lot about the committee members. We did hear from a PE teacher, Mr. Dan Kelby, and we know that some of them are parents on there. And then, of course, we're going to hear about the committee chair. So that's what we know about our advisory committee. Last, we are going to talk about the middle school English and social studies teacher. She is also at our advisory committee chair, and that is Helen Burke. She agreed to be the chair with the help of Principal Potter, so she wants some direction from Principal Potter. She is supportive of helping Mrs. Potter as needed. She does, however, believe that Principal Potter is a visionary leader, And this is very typical in districts. Boards and districts look for a visionary leader. They want somebody that can see the future and have a plan, and they want them to kind of lead and take control that way. She is very adamant that Miss Potter drafts the statements, which goes against what Mrs. Potter believes. And she does share that the community also expects Miss Potter to lead. And there was a time in the case study where she talked about her brother on the board feels like, the board feels like Miss Potter is a visionary leader, and they all have a lot of, they really support her, and they feel like that she'll do a good job as a visionary leader. Okay, so now we're going to move to the rest of section 1. I know this is kind of a long section, but we're going to talk about who promoted the current and future success and well-being of our students and adults. And I really do feel like both the superintendent and the middle school principal both. The principal was supporting of the new building for the community and wanting to make sure that students had a safe and feasible environment for them. Principal Potter is looking out for the future and success of the students and the adults by wanting to make sure they include all the stakeholders and make sure everybody's on board with the vision statement that they come up with. As far as who has the knowledge and the skills necessary to lead and design and implement, I feel like, again, the superintendent does. In there, he talks about how he wants continuous improvement, and he talks about the district values and priorities. And so that is something that they will definitely want to look at as they start their planning. The middle school principal, I feel like with her mission and vision and the way she wants to include all stakeholders, she is leading and designing and implementing in that way. Helen Burke, the chair, has the opportunity to do that if she will look at the core set of values from the district and use data and the community as recommended. And I believe also the advisory committee is in the same situation there. If they will use the information that the middle school principal shares, they are in a position to lead and look at those values and data and the community. Now, we're going to move to who did not promote the current, future success and well-being of each student and adult. And I do feel like overall Miss Burke, not considering all community stakeholders, this really puts her in this category, and also the advisory committee. They're not considering everyone involved, and so that is not promoting the success of their students and staff. And I also feel like as far as them taking the lead, if they don't consider all those things that we talked about, the values and the technology, looking at the diversity of their community, we don't know anything about them using digital citizenship or talking about equality or, having everything be equal. So I feel like both Helen Burke, the chair, and the advisory committee needed more information in order to lead, design, and implement. And so when we start talking about the following their plan, we're going to look at these areas and we're going to see exactly if they used it or not. Before we do that, though, I want to go back real quick and talk about the difference between the vision and the mission statement as we talked back with the committee. We want to make sure that they are aware that a well-written vision and mission statement gives direction for the school. The vision statement is normally written first, and it provides that destination for the organization. It should be specific to the school and reflects their values. It should be very detailed and not leave open for interpretation anywhere. It focuses on their future, and it should be inspiring and realistic. And then once they have the vision, they're going to go look at their mission statement. And this is where basically they look at broad academic and as its commitment to its students and its community. And so the mission statement should provide the school name and their values, and it describes what are they doing, who are they doing it for, how are they going to get it done, kind of give some direction, and it's very clear and concise and realistic. and it has actions to it. So both of these together, the mission and the vision statement, should promote good mental health and a sense of belonging for our students. So as they're looking at their plan, data use was used very little, and it was relied on the principal to look at that. They should include the district data, and they should collect data from the community as they continue with their plan. Technology was not used. The committee really needs to create a district-wide presentation for staff, students, families, and the community that explains the process and the importance of why they want it should include the stakeholders. Equity, we could look at this as including the entire committee and district data. If you did that, if you included everybody and you used the data, then it would be fair and equitable. But if they just have the principal alone make those decisions, then we're probably not considering equity here. Diversity, this is kind of unknown. We don't know a lot about the school and the diversity, but we can definitely look at including various social, economic, and cultural groups within the community. And there again, that's why we keep referring back to including all the stakeholders. Digital citizenship was not used. They could use the school website and communication tools to notify the community and to collect the data that they need. And so that is something that could be used more. And again, the community is not being used. They need to include parents as well as, besides who's on the committee, as well as students and other community members and organizations in the area. Okay, so looking at how did they implement their plan? First of all, they hired a principal, and then they started looking at hiring staff to work alongside the new principal. They created that advisory committee of the 8 members. The principal proposed her guidelines and the process that she would like to use. And then after everything that she gave them, the advisory committee ended up voting to have her create the statements. And I know this case study talks a lot about just the vision statement, but again, they wanted them to develop the vision, the mission, and the philosophy statements. So how did the committee evaluate their plan? There was some discussion during the meeting. There was quite a bit of discussion on why they felt like Miss Potter should be the one to do the statements. They used the chair's knowledge from her brother because he's the one that stated that they really believe in Miss Potter and feel like she could do that on her own. And they did not consider the success and well-being of students and adults when evaluating their plan. Okay, that was a lot of information in section 1. We are going to move on to section 2, which is reporting any legal or ethical issues. This was a little tough for me because there wasn't anything that just really stood out there. But I do feel like in this case study, we don't know the details of the contracts or the negotiated agreements. But if there's anything in there regarding committees or decision making, or even district policy regarding new schools and buildings and policies, there could be a breach of contract or going against district policy. So that would be a possibility there. Some people could look at this as discrimination as far as who was chosen to serve on the advisory committee. And again, we know that there were 4 staff and 4 parents. Excuse me. Again, we don't know the makeup of those and if there was a variety as far as if it was equal, and as far as the culture and the makeup of the families. And as far as I am concerned, I don't believe there was anyone was harmed. Excuse me. Okay, next section we're going to move on is our statement, what I think is happening. I feel like here our advisory committee for a new middle school has voted to have the newly hired principal draft the mission, philosophy, and vision statements instead of involving all community stakeholders as requested by the principal. So we're going to move in and we're going to look at what is missing in this case study. And there was quite a bit, I felt like, in the people end. So we have people, places, and the programs. So let's look at our people. Again, we don't know specifically we know all parents are not included, but if we have a good representation of the parents. We also don't know that for the teachers or if other teachers besides the committee would be involved. Nothing was mentioned about students being involved with making up their vision and mission statement. We don't know really a lot about the experience as far as the building administrators, or much beside what they shared as far as, promoting and supporting the building of the school and hiring of the principal. We don't know a lot about committee dynamics as far as who's on there, if we have a good representation. We also don't know, again, the community and families and cultures and what is represented. And we don't know really anything too much about our district norms, which would be important as we start looking at this. So as far as places, we don't know the exact school location. However, we do know it's 10 miles within a larger city. We do know it's rural. We don't know a lot about the community demographics, like I mentioned. We don't know really where the meetings are held. We're assuming somewhere on school grounds. We don't know a lot about the surrounding towns, or even if there's other surrounding schools, again, if it's all in one county or if the town 10 miles away is in a different county. As far as the programs, it does talk about having Principal Potter start looking at extracurricular programs and curriculum, but we don't know anything about what that involves. We don't know other community groups in the area. It doesn't really talk much about the community. We don't even know anything about a school budget or school and district policies. And then last, which I think is really important, is we don't know a whole lot about supplemental needs. Do we have SPED needs? Is there migrant or ELL needs within the community and the school? So those are all things that it would be nice and helpful if we knew those. Okay, section 5 is reviewing and prioritizing our information. And the way I did this is I really feel like it's important that we look at our people that's involved and what is most important and kind of work that way. So we need to consider who's involved, what else do we need to know, and how will the decision affect the school and the community. So the very first set of group of people here are our students. This has been my philosophy, and I truly believe through this case study it needs to also be mentioned. The students are what we're here for, and we're building a new school for them. And so we need to really consider and prioritize them as our priority. Then we're going to look at our staff and our parents. What is important, what is going to make our staff successful. Our parents are directly going to be involved with our students, so they're a high priority. Then we're going to move down and we're going to look at administration. It did talk about they wanted a visionary leader, and the board believes that Ms. Potter is one of those. They respect and rely on her. So that's the next group of people we're going to look at, and we're going to report to them and follow along with their wishes. And then we're going to consider our advisory committee and those parents and staff members. And as you can see here in a little bit, we're going to talk about some more information that they really need to make some decisions. And then we also need to look at our community, because they're our taxpayers, and prioritize who should be involved in this and why, and possibly some other community groups that we're not aware of. Okay, section 6, we are going to look at what action plan do we want to create. And so I came up with 3 here for this case study. The first is we can do nothing and just let the principal draft the statements as the committee voted on. That would probably be the easiest, the quickest, and most without conflict. The second option would be to meet with the chair of the committee and the superintendent and restate the reasons that the leader wants to include the community stakeholders, and why it's important that they lead that improvement process, why it's important to create a mission, philosophy, and vision statement. There would be an electronic presentation that includes district data, and that data could include anything from your makeup of students as far as your culture. It could be their languages. It could be male-female ratio. It could be looking at test scores. It could be looking at other scores, like we use My Sabers to do like their math and reading and their FastBridge scores. So there's lots of data that could be looked at as far as the district. You need to look at the district values, and then research shows that if you use an equitable process, that will be best as far as the success and well-being of all students and staff, and ultimately in the end, the success of your entire school. So that's the second option. The third option would be to meet with the superintendent and explain the principal's concern and request a whole new committee member that will support including all stakeholders in the creation of the statements and also support the principal's leadership style, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. So those are the three options I came up with in section 6. Moving on to section 7, we're going to evaluate that and what are some of the pros and cons. So starting with the first plan, the do nothing, I feel like this really goes more along with a diplomat leadership style. You know, they don't want to create any conflict. So a pro would be they're avoiding conflict. The statements would be written and it would save time. A con, though, could be an ethical concern, especially where Ms. Potter doesn't feel comfortable with this, and the research that she knows and has learned from her leadership classes is that you're not including everybody that should be, and to me, that's an ethical concern. It could show poor leadership. It's definitely going to affect the staff and the students, and again, could possibly violate school policy if we knew what that was. And there will could be a conflict among the school and the community, kind of a disjointed there because the school did their own thing and didn't really include the community. Our second option would be to collaboratively meet, and I feel like this follows more of a steward leadership. This would allow the pros would be the school would have support. They would have support from the community and from other coworkers and from the district. It would reinforce the policies. In my opinion, it would be ethically correct. It would benefit school improvement because you're going to be looking at all that data that we talked about. It could promote student development, which in the end is going to have them be successful. And it does advocate for staff and student needs. And it also shows good leadership and communication with everyone. Now, a con for this could be it is going to be time consuming. There's going to be some difficult conversations because not everybody in that advisory committee agrees with the principal, and it can definitely have an impact on future relationships. So then our third option was to just have a whole new committee, and I feel like this is more the pragmatic type of leadership. This one would reinforce the policies, and again, we don't know a lot about the policies, but it could also help promote student development. Because they're going to follow more along the lines of Principal Potter's philosophy. It would show good leadership and communication. Now, I hesitated to put good leadership there because I personally don't feel like you want to just completely start over and say, hey, this committee is not working with me and I don't feel like we're going to get to where we want. But if it came down to that, I feel like that is showing that you are looking out for the best interest of your students and staff. It can help benefit our school improvement to have successful students. It does advocate for student and staff needs, and it could also help develop new relationships. Now, some of the cons of the new committee would be it's going to take more time because you're kind of starting over. You may lose support and some of your resources that you already have. It's going to be some very uncomfortable conversations had with those community members as far as the parents and the staff that's on that committee. It can impact our future relationships, and the principal's leadership could be questioned because why can't the principal just get along with the committee that's already there? Okay, moving on to the next part of section 7 is evaluating the plan. And so our ultimate goal is whatever plan we choose, we want to make sure that we are looking at PLO 1, the mission, vision, and improvement. Is it integrated in the plan? So we're going to evaluate by looking at our district core values and goals. Does it include district data, which we've already talked about all the details there? Are we using technology to communicate and promote this to not only staff and students and families, but the whole community? Are we using digital citizenship, again, to promote and to communicate? Are we including all community stakeholders that we feel is important and necessary? And are we leading the improvement process? So are we, as a committee and as a principal, are we looking at the design, implementation, and evaluation of the whole plan? Okay, moving on to section 7, we're going to develop our plan. And I did this kind of with a timeline and is broken into 4 sections here. So 5 sections. So we're going to start with the immediate action. I feel like immediately there needs to be communication with the administration. We need to consider all district data as we start to proceed. We need to look at all community stakeholders. So that's something that's going to be immediate. And the second one is within a week. And I guess I should back up a little bit. I didn't even tell you which option I chose. I just jumped right in because I was so excited. I chose the second option. Let me see if I can go back here real quick. I chose our second option to collaboratively meet. I feel like that's more of a steward leadership and it has the most benefits. So moving on now to our timeline. I think within a week, we need to look at planning our next advisory meeting and doing more research, and so that there can be information given about vision and mission statements. And like with this whole class and case study and modules, there was lots of resources available for principals that they can research and refer back to. We need to look at other school statements, look at others in the state and surrounding areas, and maybe get some ideas of what they have. Look at the other buildings within the district, and then work on a presentation to present at the next advisory meeting. Then within a month, there needs to be some type of public needs survey, and that needs to be publicized and out there so that we're getting students, staff, parents, and community input. We need to communicate with all of our community stakeholders and make sure that we're including those that we feel like are important. Again, we don't know a lot about other community organizations, so it's hard to say who that would be as far as what we know from the case study. And then we need to hold our next advisory planning meeting. And then that's where Principal Potter will explain all of this to the advisory committee. Within the first year, we're going to hold planning meetings with all community stakeholders, and we're going to work together and collaborate and develop that mission, vision, and philosophy statements. We definitely want to make sure we have it, or from what I get from the case study, they want to have it by the time they open up their building. I know that was something that was mentioned was, well, is it really important to have before the building opens? I think that's a personal opinion, and again, according to the case study, it sounds like that's what they want. So they do have some time to get that in place. And then after the opening of the new building, within the next 2 years, the committee needs to go back and reevaluate the statements and make any necessary changes, because there may be some drastic changes that they need to make after it's open. There may be things that they didn't realize would be there. There may be some additional curriculum or program opportunities that came up. Some things just may feel like it's not right for the new building. And so they would need to evaluate that and make changes. Okay, so moving into section 9 is actually implementing our plan. And this is where I got a little bit more detailed as far as step by step. So Principal Potter needs to make sure she notifies all the district administration and let them know how she's going to proceed before the next meeting. She needs to get that advisory committee meeting scheduled and work on gathering all of her district information, work on getting the values and all the data that she wants to use. She's going to continue to research those leadership styles and the school and vision resources so she can include that research in her presentation. And then the next step, number 5, she's going to create that digital presentation and the planning session. And so she's going to have all of this ready. And then her 6th step will be to create the needs survey. And this is going to include staff, students, families, and the community. And I do believe like this is something that she will want to work together with the committee on so that it's not just her doing the needs survey. And then step 7, they need to use the digital platforms. So whether that's their social media, their school website, Remind, their student data system, however their school communicates, they need to use that to communicate with all stakeholders, make sure everybody that can and is available to take the survey has access to it, and that the community is getting information about the different vision resources and those leadership styles that we talked about. Then number 8, the principal is going to present the information to the committee and the superintendent. And I feel like it's really important that the superintendent is there to show support to the principal, since this is going to be kind of a tough meeting. And then once this is all presented and things are in place, they will continue to plan their future planning sessions, which will include staff, students, families, and the community. And as I mentioned in my timeline, then after the vision and mission and philosophy statements are actually selected, once they've opened the building, they will go back then and reevaluate. Okay, we are getting close to the end here. So on the rest of section 9, we're going to talk about what may happen, because this is kind of going out there on a limb for Miss Potter. She's, basically telling the committee opposite of what they wanted her to do to begin with. And so the advisory committee can refuse to collaborate. The staff or students may not be willing to participate. We may have a lack of community and support and involvement. They may not take the survey. There may be low participation in the survey that we talked about. There could even be a part of the district admin that questions the principal's leadership. Well, if you can't be a visionary leader and do what the committee says, there could be low attendance at any of the meetings that we create. And then the last possible would be we have lack of support from the Board of Education, especially since we know there is connections there with one of our community chairs. So we need to really look at what is a plan B. What happens if this whole committee meeting backfires on me as a principal? I would look at involving additional district administration. I know we talked about our superintendent, but like in our district, we have we have the personnel office, we have the assistant superintendent, we have the special ed department. There's a whole row of people that is at our administrative building that we could go to for additional help. And so hopefully they have some additional admin that they could go to. You're going to possibly want to look at the outside vision statement trainings. And what I mean by this is have some trainings for the committee and for the community. Maybe find somebody outside to come in and provide some trainings on why and how it's important to create a vision statement with all stakeholders. And there might even be some good coworkers or district staff that could provide some of that training. And then the last thing I said as far as another plan would be to reach out to other school advisory committees and kind of get some ideas and plans that would possibly be helpful there. Okay, so moving into the last section of the case study is our correlation, relevancy, and reflection. And so this case study really helped me understand how to promote the success and well-being of our students and staff by working together and developing a mission and vision statement collaboratively. I also learned that it's important to consider, you need to look at your district values, you need to look at your district data, the technology, the equity, the diversity, and use digital citizenship and involve all stakeholders in the community when leading this process. Using these and working collaboratively to lead, design, and implement a school vision and mission statement will help increase our school improvement in the end. As far as this being relevant, this module really helped me understand the process of designing the district mission and vision statements. I was able to review those steps, and all the resources and the stakeholders are important when making this decision and going through this process. And in addition, I was able to learn more about the leadership styles and how those can also affect your student, staff, and the implementation process. And then last, as far as my personal reflection, as a future leader, I want to make it a priority to lead and implement a school mission and vision statement that meets the needs and future success of my students and staff. Make sure that they have good mental health. I will include all stakeholders and consider the diversity within the district and make sure that it's an equitable process. As a leader, I want my students and staff to know what kind of leader I am and how that affects my decision making for the building. And then the last slide here I have is our references, and I did include a couple additional references from throughout this class. And this concludes my case study. Thank you very much for your time.